Welcome, everyone. I've got Wendy Lorraine with me today, and we're going to be talking about the harrowing topic of abortion and the pro-life debate as well. Wendy, like myself, believes in the sanctity of life, and she's dedicated a great portion of her ministry through music to the pro-life movement, or whether you call it pro-life or abolitionism, we can discuss it another time, but really the sanctity of life is what we're talking about today. So welcome everyone to the channel. If you do have questions or comments, do post them in the stream. But we've got a lot to talk about today before I introduce Wendy. Uh, and some of the topics, like for example, there was an 80-year-old woman recently, I think she's in like late 70s or early 80s in Scotland, that was arrested for getting too close to an abortion clinic. There's things like that in our own country, in the USA, through the FACE Act, where like grandmothers were getting jailed, and our President Trump recently pardoned them. So there's a lot going on. We also want to share some of Lorraine's music, and we'll be doing that at the end of the stream, so stay tuned for that. And as well as a couple different videos on the topic of abortion that we're going to play a few short videos and react to, like the procedure narrated by Kevin Sorbo. It is going to be, parts of this will be graphic, but I will let you know when those times come. And so with that, I'd like to introduce to you Wendy Lorraine. And welcome to the channel, Lorraine. And just give us a little bit of introduction about yourself and why you wanted to come on today. And really, I think most importantly, I think the question I would lead with you is, why is the topic of abortion so important to you personally? So welcome, and you've got the floor, Wendy.
Well, thank you so much, Brother Ashton, for inviting me on. I know it's been several years since we've done any kind of live streaming together, so it's definitely nice to be back in fellowship among brethren. The topic of abortion, the whole pro-life movement, ever since I was very young, I've always been taught, from my parents, my mother, my grandmother, just how precious life really is. And so I don't think that there's ever been a time in my life where I was, oops, I'm sorry. I'm getting some notices that Firefox crashed on me. But there's never been a time that I was pro-choice. I've always, and that's probably because of my very strong Christian upbringing. I accepted the Lord when I was 6 years old. So, I mean, I've just had the whole realm of Christianity ingrained in me from a very small child. And so, and this is such a heart-wrenching topic. It really, really is. My earliest involvement with, at least my music-wise, when I was a teenager. I got to go on a marathon for pro-life, and I sung Whitney Houston's Miracle for that. And I, it's been so long ago, I was like maybe 17 years old. And so I've always been pro-life. Back then I had a dear friend of mine that was 16 years old. She got pregnant out of wedlock, and her mother tried to force her to have an abortion. And I stepped in and I helped all I could. And she was with me at that marathon, and praise God, her son is 2 months younger than my oldest son. And so this has been something that has always been very strong with me. And then, of course, a few months ago, I wrote my song, The Silent Scream. And of course, I wrote the words to that like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and I didn't do anything with it. Maybe it was out of fear. I just, maybe it just wasn't the right time. But then I started to get back into music, and I'm like, nah, I've got to put music to this. And with the Lord's help, even though it's a very hard, emotional song, um, but the message is not so much attacking, or, quote unquote, attacking the women that find out that they're pregnant. It's all based on the unborn child. Let's think about the unborn child.
That's great. That's a great perspective. That brings up a lot of questions for me, and I also wanted to share some of the lyrics. It's a very it's like a haunting melody, and just very emotionally charged, very powerful lyrics in that song. But what, and we'll play it again for those tuning in. We're going to play Lorraine's song at the end of the stream for you guys to hear. But the silent scream, there was a documentary in, I think, 1984 or so, black and white documentary of an abortionist who claims he performed something like 75,000 abortions, or oversaw a combination of doing them and overseeing about 75,000 abortions. Does this song, having that same name, was this inspired by that, or what is the
I
name?
didn't even know about that video. Honestly, it's like when I wrote the words
Wow.
several years ago, um, I just always named it the silent scream. And it wasn't until you had told me about that I'm like, oh, wow, that's like, I mean, I don't believe in coincidences, obviously. I mean, it
Yeah.
was a total God thing. It really, really was.
That's what I was going to say. That's amazing, because to come up with that same phrase, the silent scream, and that was a huge thing when it came out in the 1980s. It was endorsed by President Ronald Reagan. It was shown in churches all across America. It was shown in schools. And it
Hmm.
really changed the abortion debate to something very, it showed people what is really happening through an ultrasound, through like a suction abortion where the baby is, moving away from the doctor's tool as it's trying to be killed. Um, and now some will say that's a reflex. Others say no, that's the baby, the human life reacting. We're going to look at, before we get too deep into that topic, we're gonna watch together the procedure, narrated by Kevin Sorbo, where it's kind of a modern animated rendition, something similar to that, and we'll talk about that more. But just to kind of take a look real quick at some of the lyrics in your song, and then just to talk about the silent scream and how you came up with that, like what put that, because I do think that's a God thing, that's so amazing that that coincides with it, but it's just such an emotional, an apt phrase, right? So I'm just going to read a little bit of the lyrics. It says, "A new life begins. A soul has been born. Will you let love grow? Do you even want to know? They say it is the mother's choice. Do you take her freedom away? What about the child growing inside? Where's that child's right to life? The silent scream you never hear, one that only heaven hears. A little girl or a little boy, did you even want to know? When will we say no more?" I hope I didn't butcher it. I'm just giving it a reading. It's much more powerful when you actually hear it in song. But what inspired you, to come up with that name? Did it just come to you? And did you write both the lyrics and the music? Tell us a
I
little
did.
bit about the song.
Yes, I did. Like I said, the lyrics I wrote first, and it was like between 3 and 4 years ago. And I'm trying to remember back then, what my whole mindset was. But my heart was just very heavy on that topic, honestly. And now that I think about it, I had written another song, and I looked for the copy of it, and I don't have it anymore. But it was like to the effect of a baby that had already been aborted speaking to the mother, forgiving the mother for ending its life. And I had, I mean, I didn't put any music, but I had gotten like the poem or the words all done, and I couldn't find it. And then it was just like, just grief, because it's like, when will people realize that this is a child, and that murder is never the answer to choices that you make in your life. And we all make mistakes. We all do things that we shouldn't do. I mean, even though I've been a Christian for 40 some years, you know, even with my walk with the Lord, I mean, I've made some horrendous choices that, if you knew me back then, you would swear she's not saved because of my actions, but I absolutely was. And so it's just, it's a gut wrenching topic, but I just felt like I can't be silent, because it's like, for me, I don't go to, Planned Parenthood. I mean, there's been a few times that I, stood in the picket stream or whatever. And it's like, I drive by a clinic almost every day in my neighborhood when I'm going to work. And I see both sides out there, even today, holding up their signs. And I figured, okay, well, just because I don't really get involved in that aspect, what can I do to help defend innocent life? Well, I can allow God to use the gift that He gave me um, to promote life. And so that's kind of where the silent scream has come from.
Absolutely. And we all have different gifts and different uses within the body. We're not all the ear or the eyes or the hand or the feet. We all have different ways that we can serve the Lord. And it's just a reminder that this is such an important topic that the church and Christians should never really let go of until abortion really is abolished in the land. There's so much going on today with the transgenderism debate and, men and women's sports and all the woke stuff and, illegal immigration. There's just so many pressing topics that the nation is facing. You sometimes, some of us, like, you almost sideline abortion for a while. And then eventually you got to realize, what, this continues to be one of the biggest and dearest issues to God's heart, and something that we have to constantly return to in our ministries and shine a light on this great darkness. But let's talk about the procedure for a minute and how it ties into your song and your video. And then I'll actually go ahead and play it. It's about, I don't know, 4 or 5, is it like 4 or 5 minutes or something? And we'll go ahead and play it.
Yeah,
And
it's about 5 minutes, and I didn't even know about the procedure. How I came across that short animated video is I had gotten my song all done, and I shared the video with my sister, my biological sister, Shanna, because she's also pro-life, and she's the one that told me about the procedure, and she sent me the link, and I'm like, oh, I've got to share this. And so on my channel, A Standard Bearer, I played the procedure and then my song again, because I had already premiered my song first. And then I was sent the procedure link. And so then I included my song again at the end of the procedure.
it was very powerful that way because the procedure is very hard to watch. And it's very
even
emotional.
though it's animated, it's so hard. And it's like, I had to mentally prepare myself, because I'm like, I don't want to watch this because I know what, but it's like, nope, you got to do it. You got to do it.
Totally. In some ways, it's even harder to watch because it's animated, because it's so visual. It's so, it's like colorful and you see so much. Um, but it's just powerful how you ran your song together with that because you're kind of shattered by watching that, and then your music comes in back to back, and that's a very powerful thing you did. And so we'll watch the procedure together, and maybe I'll stop it in parts and we'll discuss, or we'll see. Maybe I'll just run the whole thing, or we'll kind of stop it and react. But and then I also want to get into some of the debate around the procedure and this idea of, well, first of all, when does life begin? As
Right.
Christians, biblically, and even scientifically, we know that life begins at conception. You've got Harvard University, Princeton University, um, medical associations like pediatric associations, all affirming that life begins at the moment of conception, human life. And then you've got activists, pro-choice activists, pro-abort activists, changing that narrative to that it starts at 24 weeks once the cortex of the mind is formed or begins to form, and personhood occurs or viability occurs. And so there's a great debate on that. It's really relevant to the procedure because some will say it's just pure reflex. Even though nerves are formed, it's just pure reflex, is what they claim,
Right. And they can't feel pain.
that they can't feel pain. And so I want to discuss that topic with you as we watch the procedure. I actually did just a little bit of research, seeing what the other side says, what the arguments are, and I'd love to dive into those arguments. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start the procedure. I do want to warn people, it is graphic. I did not want to share this at first. At first, I'm like, man, I don't know if we should even share this on the stream because it is hard to watch. And at first, I'm like, I couldn't watch it. And then you kind of, came back and you kind of push yourself and, because it is hard to watch. So
Yeah, you
if this
got to
is
mentally
something,
prepare. You
yeah,
do
mentally prepare.
pray about it. I would say anybody that's watching, here in a minute, we're going to share this. So if you have to, pause, go to your prayer closet, pray about it. And if you just feel like you just can't, I mean, you always have the option to fast forward, but I would encourage you not to. Maybe let the heart, maybe let the Lord break your heart on this topic. And maybe if you're, on the fence, or you're from the other side, just be willing to hear us and hear our hearts, because we're not sitting here calling anybody who believes in pro-choice, we're not calling you baby killers or murderers. We're trying to come to you with the heart of love, and just know that Jesus died for you, and there absolutely is forgiveness, but just have an open mind and an open heart.
Great advice. And if you're not watching this live, you can always fast forward, through this part. But like Wendy said, if the Lord's leading you, I encourage you to watch because it is heart-wrenching and really opens the eyes to what actually happens during an actual abortion. So with that, I'm going to mute and I'll play this.
I just arrived at work as the hospital's lead sonographer and was looking at the patient's schedule for the day when my boss told me to go immediately to the OR. The surgeon was requesting ultrasound guidance. That was all the information I was given. I had no idea what I was walking into. I wheeled the ultrasound machine into the OR. The patient was already sedated on the operating table. Plugging in the machine, I waited for instructions from the doctor. He barked at me to place the ultrasound probe on the patient's pelvis so he wouldn't perforate her uterus. Still confused about the procedure, I did as he asked and realized the woman was pregnant. She was in her second trimester, so I easily determined the gender of her baby, a little girl. Stunned, I watched the doctor thrust a catheter into the amniotic sac. The fetus dodged the catheter and tried to hide in the top of her mother's uterus to get away. In horror, I watched as he inserted a forceps clamp and grabbed her tiny leg. She writhed around in pain, trying to break free, but there was nowhere for her to go. Then the doctor pulled hard until her leg ripped away from her body. She recoiled and violently twisted around in pain and curled herself into a tight ball. But it was no use. The clamp grabbed her arm and she struggled to pull away. Her movements weakened now because she was dying. He pulled her arm off of her body. My vision blurred. My eyes filled with tears. The child again curled herself into a tight ball, but again, the device grabbed her other leg and it was ripped from her body. By now, her heartbeat had slowed significantly, but she was still alive. The clamp grabbed her last limb and ripped it off. She wiggled and squirmed around, and then her heart finally stopped beating. I announced that there was no more cardiac.
Okay, I'm just going to stop it for a minute to discuss a little bit. It's harrowing, as we warned you. Very hard to watch. We'll finish the video in a minute, but your reaction, Wendy, is there anything you want to share before I get into some of the criticisms of this? Obviously, it's very hard to watch.
Well,
It's
the first thing I want to point out, some of you probably recognize, and I mean, Afshin pointed out who was narrating. It's Kevin Sorbo. And the thing that struck me with it is, number one, it's based on a true story of a sonographer who, he's just doing his job. He does sonograms all the time of, different areas of the body, and he's called into an operating room, and he has no foreknowledge that he's going to be participating in an abortion. Probably if he had been given that information, he would have said, I'm not doing it. Because you'll see as we finish the rest, what happens to this man. And so I thought that was horrific, to put a medical employee through something so shocking like that. But
and it's a true story, right?
It was a true story. Yes.
And they did not notify him that this is what he was about to do, which
right,
is just
right. Because sonographers, they do all kinds of different body parts, for tumors and whatnot, So just because it's a sonographer doesn't automatically mean that it's going to be a sonogram of an unborn life, But as far as the rest, it's just, the animation was so good to portray that child as a human being that actually is feeling pain. And of course, the opposition is going to say, okay, well, it's not sentient life until about 24 weeks. Now, I don't think they gave an age gestation in that video, but just from the diagram of the baby, it would look to be maybe between 20 and 24 weeks. I mean, what are your thoughts, Afshin?
So I looked this up. The original silent scream that we talked about in 1984 or so was a 12-week abortion. This one in the procedure was a 15-week abortion. And so the debate is that what the opposition, the other side says, is that they don't feel any pain until they're 24 weeks, because that's when the cortex develops in the mind. And even though there's nerves in the spinal cord and there's there's nerves there, they say they can't feel it because there's no connection between those nerves and the brain. And I do want to discuss that. It's a very controversial topic. But let's finish the video, and then I want to come back and kind of talk about the technical, scientific aspects of that, the faith aspects of that. I want to talk about what the Bible says on some of this in terms of when life begins, what the science says on when life begins, and how they're trying to redefine the definition of life. So let's go ahead and finish watching the video. We just wanted to get, just some input there, and then we'll come back and get into a deeper
activity. The nurse and scrub tech in the room gasped, realizing for the first time that this was happening to a fetus that was still alive. The remaining body parts, the head and torso, were removed. Placenta was removed, and a final look with ultrasound revealed all products of conception were removed. I was told I could leave the room. Up until that moment, I had been frozen. I silently removed the ultrasound machine from the operating room, went directly to the locker room, and threw up. I quit my job at that hospital shortly after. I told my boss I would never again participate in that type of procedure. I was having nightmares and could not escape the memory of what I had witnessed. I would never again assist in the murder of a child. It was over 20 years ago, but it's just as vivid in my mind today as the day it happened. The saddest part is that this procedure is still happening today. People have no idea we are murdering babies in this way. They think it isn't a person, that it's just a mass of tissue. I'm so sorry for what happened to this little girl, for what I did to her. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry.
Okay, so a few more, a few thoughts. One, it's just horrific how the body parts, when it's a 15-week abortion, the baby is too big to just do a standard like vacuum extraction, which is what they do at 12 weeks or below, right? But when it's at 15 weeks, the bones have grown too large to be able to do that. And so they have to literally break off the limbs with forceps, as we saw, and it's just horrific how they do that. Of course, then they have to.
Something else too. When women have a miscarriage, where by nothing that they do to kill the baby, it just the baby dies inside the womb. At that stage of development, you have contractions and you go through everything like a live birth. And some people know this, but I had a miscarriage before my youngest son was born. I was about 10 weeks along, and I did at one point get to see the heartbeat. But I can tell you, even at 10 to 12 weeks, it was like it was painful. I had to pass the baby vaginally, and so even further along, it's just so sad.
It is, and even at that younger 12-week stage, it's still, they have to dilate the cervix and all this to be able, because it is still big. It's not like a tiny little thing, but then the forceps have to come out apparently at like 15 weeks or after. And it's just horrific, right? What you see. And, there's a debate, there's a debate about all this. And this is it's a D&E dilation and evacuation extraction, where they use suction and forceps used to remove the fetus into pieces. And just kind of looked up some of this to kind of share, but it's about a 10 to 20 minute procedure. And at that level, at 15 weeks, when this procedure happened, the spinal nerves are developed or mostly developed. The sensory receptors are developed, and the brainstem are more developed than they are. They're not fully developed, but they're more developed than they would be at like 12 weeks. And another interesting fact, when we debate this idea of whether the baby feels pain, because that's the question, does the baby actually feel pain? And that's been the debate. Is it just, you know, like a reaction, like
A
instinct,
reflex.
reflex, right? Or is it actual pain where the baby is trying, it looks like it's pain where it's trying to get away from it.
And
But
if
you have to
it's just one thing that's coming to my mind for those who believe that it's just reflexes. Okay, well, it looks like they're trying to get away from the instruments. How could something that I mean, and it's like, how can that just be reflex? To me, it seems like there's some awareness that there's possible danger, because it's like for us, it's like when we know that there's danger around, we're going to try to avoid it, you know. And it's like, how can you say it's just reflex when the baby is moving around and trying to get away from the instruments? How can that just be reflex?
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I believe life begins at conception, and either way, it's tragedy. And another thing to note on that is that for example, a 15-week preborn baby, like we saw in this procedure, when that abortion is happening, it's releasing cortisol, which is the stress hormone. When it senses that instrument coming towards it, it actually does release stress. So there is stress being released, and adrenaline gets released. So we're just talking scientifically, right? During the basis, chemical adrenaline, the chemical aspect of it, the cortisol, adrenaline, and also the heart rate spikes. So why would it do that if the baby is completely unaware of what's going on?
Right. The raised heartbeat is, to me, is like a dead ringer, because if it's just reflexes, the heart rate's not going to go up. I mean, if you had your arm pulled from you or your leg pulled from you, your heart rate's going to go up, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. And I'm trying to give you the counter arguments to this, so that you're going to encounter this if you're talking to people, because I think you said you encountered this with even your own family members, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
We all have family members that we're trying to reach, not only for things like these social issues and abortion, but also the gospel. But their counter argument, and tell me what the counter arguments you're hearing from your family. But what I looked up, what they're saying is that pain perception needs the cortex in the brain to be developed, because it's those thalamocortical connections between the nerves. So you have the nerves that are developed, but their argument is that unless there's that signal going to the brain, into the cortex of the brain, even though the nerves are there, they're not functional in the mind, in the brain where you feel it, until about starting around 24 weeks and then fully forming at 26 to 28 weeks. But they'll admit that at 15 weeks, the cortex is there. It's not like it's absent. It's just that it's more rudimentary. It hasn't fully developed. So that's sort of where the debate is. And they say that, well, there's no EEG evidence of consciousness and all of this stuff. And this is where the debate gets into personhood at 24 weeks, is what they argue now, versus life begins at conception. And that's how all this ties in together. So what are your thoughts, and what are you hearing from, personally from family who believes that they don't feel it?
Well, the family member that I have been trying to lovingly deal with does not believe in abortion after sentience, and that's scientifically shown to be at about 24 weeks, and that before then it's just a clump of cells. They've spoken about how it's not a person, there's no consciousness, that it's just a reflex. And one of the questions that I recently asked them was, okay, so if you believe that it's a baby at 24 weeks, does that mean one day before that 24-week mark that they're not a baby, but the next day they are a baby? And then I reminded them, I'm like, at one point you were all those cells dividing and dividing, and you grew into who you are now. And of course this person at this point has rejected almost everything that they've been taught since an early child of the Bible. So it's like, even though I can quote the scripture to them of how I formed you in the womb, they won't take that, because they don't believe in Jesus anymore. They don't believe in the Bible. The Bible is full of contradictions. And so it's the propaganda of pro-choice. And of course they even feel that I'm pro-choice, and I guess because it's like, I don't feel that we can forcibly stop a woman, and I know you might view this a little bit differently, Afshin, and maybe this is something we can talk about, but can we force a woman who has just their mind set that they're getting an abortion, can we force them to carry the baby? I mean, it's like, would I want to be forced to take a vaccination? No, I mean, I do believe you have to have choice. But on the opposite side of that, I want to make sure that the women are educated, because maybe it's a woman that doesn't know that it's a baby, that has believed the lies that it's just a clump of cells. Whereas if they really knew what was happening, maybe it would save the child's life.
Right. Well, I'll tell you my view. I mean, certainly under current law, we can't force anybody, right? So, and I think it really comes down to the culture, reaching the individual with truth and with life. So I think the real battle begins in the social culture, reaching people individually and ultimately getting them saved. Now, would I like abortion to be illegal? Yes, I would. I would like it to be, abolished. And just like murder, we don't want to give people choice on that. We want it to be illegal, right? So, but under our present laws, absolutely, we can't force anyone. And everything always is better for that person to realize, to come to a place where they say, this is murder and I don't want to do it. So I always prefer reaching the person individually, changing the culture, especially through the gospel. I don't know if you always believed that abortion was murder before you were saved. Maybe you were saved as a child. But
6 years old, so it's like for me, I've always believed,
Yeah, that makes sense. Because for me, I wasn't saved until I was 21. And it's incredible the amount of antichrist spirit in the culture, and the propaganda in the culture. I was definitely pro-choice until I got saved. I mean, I didn't grow up in church. I didn't do any of that. And it was automatic. Like, I was automatically pro-choice because the whole argument is framed as a woman's right to choose. right? And you're backwards and you're a bigot and you're restricting women and all this stuff is the whole argument that's so prevalent in the culture that as a non-believer, you just, especially as a young non-believer in my 18, 19, when I'm 18 or 19, just growing up in the culture, there's no way you would be pro-life. I mean, it has to take some kind of religious background, at least, even if you're not saved, to at least have a religious background. At least back in the 80s and 90s when I grew up. The debate has changed. I think there's more awareness on it now. We've got ultrasounds. And so, things are maybe different now. I'd love to hear from other people, today who maybe are not saved, how they, what they think about it. But yeah, it has to be through the culture ultimately. That's how we reach people.
Well, it's like I've heard many, pastors that I listen to, and you've probably said this in some of your sermons too. It's a culture of death. It really is, because not only are people advocating for, women's rights to kill their unborn child, but also for euthanasia and the right to end your own life. And I mean, that's a whole other topic that we could talk about it at some other time. But it's just, and that's what Satan is. He's all about death. Satan comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And he was a murderer from the beginning. He really was.
Right, absolutely. I want to share this slide as you bring up women's rights. This is a meme that you guys have all seen, I'm sure. This goes around a lot, but it's this whole idea of your body, not your body, right? I mean,
Right.
a baby has, at the moment of conception, and this is where it goes to this debate really needs to be framed around getting people saved is the best way to get them to become pro-life. Because for me, when I got saved at 21 years old, that was like over 30 years ago now. You can kind of guess my age based on that. But, overnight, I went from being, pro-choice to pro-life, open to people being, homosexual. I wasn't, but open to, let people do their own thing, whatever. I was like an advocate for all of the liberal issues of the day until the moment that I literally, believed that Jesus is Lord. I was born again. And overnight, my mind was just like everything just clicked in. I was like, wow, abortion really is murder. Like that was one of my very, very first thoughts as a Christian. I mean, like the day that I got saved, it clicked in. Or like 24 hours, within 24 hours, it's like abortion really is murder. Homosexuality really is wrong. And you just see through the propaganda. But at the moment of conception, when the sperm and the egg come together and there's fertilization, there is unique DNA that is formed, right? It's when that sperm and that egg meet, a zygote with a complete unique set of 46 human chromosomes, right? 23 from each parent is created, and that DNA is distinct from both parents, right? So that's how I know that baby inside your body is not your body, right? It's not my body, my choice. It's, it's a unique baby. It's that unique, distinct DNA, distinct from both parents, marks the start of a new human life, right? And this is sort of what's called the genetic fingerprint, right, of life. And then also mitosis begins, cell division begins, and that human life begins to grow immediately, right? So it's not your body, not your choice. And I'm curious as a woman, what you think of that, because we're often told as men, we shouldn't even have an opinion on this because it's your body, it's your choice. And but I see it as, I'll just say this, I see it as that choice really begins when you decide to sleep with someone, right? When you decide to have sex with someone, that's when that choice needs to be made, because the consequence of that, the reality is that you can't have a baby. And so the choice shouldn't be a form of contraception afterwards in the form of abortion.
Plan
It
B.
plan B, right? It's before is when that choice comes in. So what are, as a woman of God, what do you think about this whole debate of choice?
Well, it's like you. It's totally separate DNA, and some of the arguments that they try to bring in is, that it's equivalent to a tumor. Okay, well, if you look at the cells or the DNA of just a tumor, a benign tumor in your body, I mean, yeah, it's gonna have your DNA, but a fetus is a separate entity from you that has its own unique DNA code. And of course, one of the other things, and this is something that you can comment on too, brother. They'll say, okay, well, yeah, we can see teaching abstinence, being responsible and abstaining, but what about the women that are raped or that there's incest? And it's like my heart absolutely goes out to women that this has happened to, but it still comes down to, just like you didn't have a choice in if you were raped or molested, why are you putting that same thing and forcing the ending of a life of someone else who didn't have a choice? It's not like the mother is saying, okay, well, I'm going to get pregnant. And, I mean, you see what I mean? It's like,
Yeah,
why? It's like they're both victims. The woman and the child, they're both victims in that case. Now I can understand women would be traumatized and mentally they may not want anything to do with that child. I mean, that's sad, but don't kill the child. Don't punish the child for something that they had no knowledge of, that they didn't create themselves. It's like, if anything, give that child up for adoption.
absolutely. That's such an important plea. It's just so true. And you've probably heard this, and I hear this going around, but if you have an ultrasound with one baby conceived out of love and another baby conceived out of rape, can you tell the difference? Right? They both look the same.
Right.
And they're a victim. They're a victim as much as, as maybe not as much as the mother, but they will be a victim of abortion.
Right.
If you decide to terminate that pregnancy. And adoption is always an answer. I don't understand. Like, so many people want to adopt, and we need to bring down costs of adoption and even maybe federally fund things like adoption. Maybe, there's solutions that we can have to promote adoption rather than abortion.
Well,
But
there's a lot of couples that, whether it's the man or the woman, for whatever reason, they're not able to have children. That all they want is to just have a child in their life and in their arms. And it's just like all these millions of babies. It's like, why? When there's so many couples, that can't have children, and you're just killing all these children.
absolutely. And they don't have to turn to IVF, which is a whole nother topic that I actually plan on getting into with another guest that's coming on in a couple of weeks, but from the abolition side of the argument. But you don't have to even turn to that. You can adopt, but this is something that, the pro board or pro choice side brings up all the time. Whenever the argument is lost, whenever you show them human life begins at conception and all of this, and there's unique strands of DNA, et cetera, and if they don't want to face that, they always turn to, well, what about rape and incest or life of the mother? But, if you look at the stats, it's less than 1% of abortions were cited for medical reasons or for rape. Okay. Less than 1%. Now, still horrific. We have complete sympathy and empathy for, a woman that gets raped. It's wicked. It's evil. The rapist needs to be punished to the full extent of the law, not the baby. But
Right.
but in terms of making an argument for, pro-choice or pro-life, it's really not a good argument, because those same people, you could say, well, then are you going to be pro-life for elective abortions? And you're only going to want to, restrict then, life of the mother, rape and incest. And of course they'll say, no, all of it should be available. Right. So it's kind of it's a disingenuous argument. It's just kind of a gotcha type of argument that they try to make, because if they were sincere, well, then make, at least I want it all illegal, really. But if from their perspective, why not make all elective abortions illegal and be pro-life and just restrict those abortions? I'm saying from their perspective, right?
Right.
But in Florida, for example, where I am, it's only 0.15% of cases are for rape or medical reasons. For incest, it's only 0.1 to 0.5%. And so again, it's just a disingenuous argument to make, which is something they always go to. But I want to shift gears for a minute and share one more video. And I don't think you've seen this one yet, Wendy, but I want to share this, and it's just a short video, and get your reaction to something that's happened in Scotland. And we'll discuss, share some Bible verses, and then we'll go to your song and share that as well. So this is a woman in Scotland recently. They have certain laws there that create buffer zones. And I'm trying to remember the name of the law. I forget, but it'll mention it. But it's basically creating buffer zones around abortion clinics where you can't be you have to be 200 meters away from an abortion clinic in order to protest or make your voice heard. In the US, we have buffer laws too, but they're like 15 feet to 100 feet or something, which even that I disagree with. I think if you're on public ground, you should be able to protest. There should be no buffer zones. But in Scotland, it's 200 meters. And to get kind of the scale of that, that's the size of 2 football fields. So, and it's a radius of 2 football fields. I mean, blocks and blocks wide, all around, 2 football fields in every direction. If you hold up a sign that says abortion is murder or don't do it, it doesn't have to be that obnoxious. It could just be, pro-life. We're pro-life. You will get arrested, as evidenced by something like an 80-year-old woman getting arrested. And this is something that J.D. Vance, our vice president, also discussed when he was in front of the European leadership recently. He made a great speech about freedom of speech, freedom of information, and just having civil liberties in our cultures. Something that in Europe has been a struggle and a battle for a long time. I mean, fascism, as we know, in the 1940s came out of Europe. So it's no surprise that they're returning to it in many ways. Like in Germany, for example, on another topic, in Germany, if you post a meme online that's offensive, you'll go to jail. People have been jailed for that. But let me share with you this video in Scotland of this woman and to get your reaction, because this just literally happened a few days ago.
Rose Doherty standing outside the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Glasgow this afternoon. Let's see what happens next.
She we are aware of the legislation. It's a restricted area for protests. So you're within this restricted area. You're aware of that? Right. Rose, at this moment in time, the time is 1,500 hours. I'm going to charge you. I'm going to charge you, but before I do so, I'm caution you. You're not obliged to say anything. Anything you do say will be noted down and may be used in evidence. The offence is, now in this day and date, you involve yourself in a protest which within a restricted zone that's likely to cause distress or harm to others. Contrary to Section 4 of the Abortion Services Scotland Safe Zones Act, Scotland Act 2024. Do you understand that charge? Do you wish to make any reply to that charge? Right, that's fine. What will happen just now is I'm not going to take you back to the station. You will be reported from the street. I will ask you to leave this area now. If you refuse to do so, you will be arrested for refusing to desist and you will be taken to a station. So I'm going to kindly ask you to move on from here. Tell up to yourself where you want to do it, please. That's fine. I'm going to speak with my gaffer. You have been charged with the offence. I'm asking you nicely. You will be reported for the offence. But if need be, we will take that. Okay?
So you're refusing to move?
Refusing to move.
Okay.
So we will be going back to the station.
Need to arrest you, okay?
Okay.
Can you place your sign down for me? Thank you. You can take it with us, but I need to have it.
I'm not going to put cuffs on you. Right, we'll just put it on the front, okay? Just so it's... Can you step it? Please step back.
I can understand you're embarrassed.
No, I've got absolutely no issues with you filming, but please take a step back.
Just take a step back from us, that's all. Perfect. See where your colleagues standing? Very happy standing there. Okay, thank you.
Of course, for years we've been fed the narrative of intimidation, harassment, molestation, people preventing people from accessing so-called healthcare. But what we see here is the simple reality of this law in action, preventing exactly what it's supposed to prevent. Now, the target of this law is influence. So this is why the law is so evil. It's trying to prevent influence. It's trying to prevent people who are trying to save lives, people who are trying to save the lives of the unborn. That's what the law is intended to stop. And this law, this buffer zone law, only one member of the Scottish Parliament voted against it. That was John Mason. So Kate Forbes, for example, you voted for this persecution of your fellow Christians, but it's never too late. I mean, you could apologise, you could say that you wish you'd never done that, and I think that would be a really positive step if you were able to do that. Now, some people at the moment seem to think the Reform Party is the answer to all our problems. Where's the Reform Party? Buffer zones on pro-life issues in general? Well, the answer generally is nowhere to be seen. So, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President J.D. Vance, you were talking about this law a few days ago, and here it is manifest in action. And it is absolutely appalling, as I'm sure you will agree. Now, it's pretty sobering watching that, isn't it? I find it quite sobering being there filming this afternoon. And I would urge you to be able to watch this video again. Watch Rose being handcuffed and led away by the police again. And then surely the question I would like to ask everyone is, can you really still believe that the way forward is to vote for parties that will implement this sort of evil, and then somehow or other, by some strange mysterious process, they're going to get elected and good is going to come from it? Really, really, the time for this delusion is over. It's time to vote for what you believe in, stand up for what you believe in, and a good first step for that would very well be to join the Scottish Family Party.
All right. So, man, I mean, what do you think of that? What do you think of those police officers in this law, the buffer zone?
I missed what did her sign say? I saw coercion, but what did the rest of her sign say?
I'd have to go back, but it was just a pro-life sign. Coercion.
Okay.
Let me see if I could go back real quick. Coercion is a crime.
Here to talk only if you want.
Yeah. So she's basically doing, like, sidewalk counseling pretty innocuous. 82-year-old grandmother just standing there, silently, not saying a word, holding up a sign.
Take you back.
But basically saying that the pro-choice is coercion. Is that kind of what I'm reading? Like, because when you follow the propaganda, it's getting all these women to end the life of their unborn child. Is
That
kind of
very well-
how I'm looking at that. I mean, I could be wrong, but
That very well could be. That sounds right to me. I hadn't thought about the sign itself. I was just so shocked by the image of this 82-year-old grandmother being literally put in handcuffs for being pro-life. It's just shocking. But yeah, I'm curious if anyone knows what that sign coercion, which she was talking about. It could be the coercion of killing the baby, right? Through the propaganda, through the law,
on the lies.
In the lies.
Because a lot of it is, or half truths at most, that it's just a clump of cells. And I remember the last stream that I was not in live with you, but I was, in the chat. Brother Bill came on and he was saying, even in where he lives in England, that people are arrested for praying in front of abortion clinics. And I said, well, how would they even know you're praying if you're just, because you could just stand there. I mean, you don't have to be, you could just be standing there, just not saying anything, your eyes open, but, you're silently praying in your head. But what if you're not? I mean, they're just assuming that you're just, it's like, assumption that you're just a kook Christian and you must be praying, and yeah. I found that just horrendous.
It is just your very presence in these buffer zones are an offense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this buffer zone law in Scotland. And what's crazy about this new law in Scotland that was just passed, that JD Vance brought up, like they were saying, is that it's not only in public. If you're in that 200 meters, again, 2 football fields buffer zone, size of 2 football fields, if you're in your own house, in your own backyard, and you're holding a sign through the window or through your backyard or garden or somewhere, and somebody can see it from the outside, they will come in and arrest you inside your own home.
Oh, well, now, could that even extend, like, let's say you've got a nosy neighbor that knows you're a Christian and maybe knows that you're pro-life. I mean, could they call the cops on you and say, okay, they're when maybe you're not doing anything except, maybe watch it. I mean, that's like Orwellian. That's horrible. It's scary. That's scary.
It is very scary. I mean, as the law stands right now, it has to be seen or heard. So if you're yelling from your own backyard, not even, 200 meters away from the abortion clinic, right? 2 to like 3 city blocks away from that clinic, and you're yelling, pro-life slogans or, holding up a sign. If someone sees you, yeah, they'll come in and they can report you and arrest you. But yeah, eventually the idea is this will extend to thought crime. Is how JD Vance put it.
Right.
And it's scary. I mean, Europe, like I said earlier, was the birthplace in many ways in modern times of fascism, and with Hitler in the 1940s. And it's kind of going, it's kind of been that battle for a while. I think this is one of the reasons, whether you're pro-Trump or anti-Trump and or whatever, but this is why Trump does not get along very much with these sort of fascist European leaders in many ways. I find it interesting. It's another topic, so I won't go too much into this, but find it interesting that he gets along with, Putin and North Korea and China, not to promote them, not to say, hey, I'm with them, but to keep the peace, to have relations with other global, world leaders. But when it comes to like Justin Trudeau of Canada or like, the people in Germany or Europe, it's like they hate him. and he hates them because it's this idea of fascism against American liberty. And so we're seeing that, we're seeing that a lot in Europe, and it's a warning to us in the USA to continue to resist the left, to continue to resist wokeism, socialism, communism. It's all coming from that left spectrum, and that's where really that totalitarianism comes in. Some people get
Oh yeah,
caught up
yeah,
on,
because
oh, it's not
it'll be coming
fascism.
here. It'll
Yeah,
be coming here before we
I
know.
mean,
If
brother,
we don't push back, we're next.
absolutely, brother Bill's been warning for that for decades. I've been, warning for that for decades. We see that, and so it's important to keep fighting back. But just shocking, what's happened, in Europe and continues to happen. But let's go ahead. I want to share a little bit of scripture to kind of spiritually codify what we've been talking about. And then, we do want to share your song as well, as we've been going just over an hour, which is great. This is such an important topic. We could just keep going.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we're going to have Wendy back on, and Wendy Lorraine back on other topics as well. And so I look forward to that. But let me just share a couple Bible verses to just kind of, like I said, codifying away what we've been talking about in the Bible. And let's start with Psalm 22:10. Says, I was cast upon thee from the womb. Thou art my God from my mother's belly. And so when it comes to this debate that we've been having about, when does life begin? Is it at conception? Well, of course, it's at conception biblically. We know that. But even this idea of personhood, right? Because the anti-lifers or the pro-choicers frame it as you don't have personhood till you're 24 weeks, because that's when the mind is fully conscious, and the cortex is formed, and you achieve personhood. The day before, or whenever that is, you're just a clump of cells. Well, this says in Psalm 22:10, thou art my God from my mother's belly, right? So from the moment that you implant in the belly, and I would argue even before at conception, right? God is our God. And this is a personal distinction here. This is God personally saying, or the psalmist saying personally about God, that thou art my God from my mother's belly. I was cast upon thee from the womb.
Right. It's attributing personhood to the writer, that it's implying that there is a unique person who is saying, thou art my God from my mother's belly.
Exactly right, Wendy. And that's why that's such an important verse. We know biblically where we stand. The question is, how do we show people who are non-believers, but there's just, we have, you guys know the verse about John the Baptist, right? Leaping in the womb when he was in the presence of Jesus,
Right.
as a baby, like weeks old, as far as Jesus was concerned. So there's so much scripture on this. Isaiah 49:10, listen, O isles, unto me, and hearken, ye people from far. The Lord hath called me from the womb, from the bowels of my mother hath he made mention of my name. So again, it's personhood. This debate is over personhood. When does personhood begin? Biblically, it begins at the very least from the womb, if not from conception itself. You could argue conception itself from other verses, but definitely, as far as we're going to take a strict interpretation from the womb, is extraordinarily clear.
Well, and the Lord there in that verse, can you go back to the Isaiah verse?
Yes, right here.
The Lord, it's saying the Lord has named the child even before the parents give the name of the child after birth, or even sometimes before birth, you pick out a name. The Lord has named the child. He's made mention of my name.
Absolutely. And that's where personhood comes in. As believers, it's clear. You can't have any other position than the life position if you're, coming into concord with God's word.
Well, that shows that God considers that a human being. So it's like the naysayers, they can say all they want. What it really comes down to, okay, is what does God say? God's named that person, and it's like, in the end, we're all going to stand before the Lord, and going to have to give an account of our lives, and that's why salvation, like with what you said happened to you, the moment you got saved, it's just like the Lord he changed your mind, and you realized, okay, that this is a human life.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's tremendous. The name, like you said, it's personal to God. I'll share one more verse and get to show that it's not only from the womb, it's before that. It's even before that. And we get that from, are you seeing Jeremiah 1:5 on your screen?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. Again, this is a personal admonition. God knows us even before he formed us in the belly. And before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. So this would speak of conception, and even prior, because God's omniscience, knowing us, knowing who we are. It's very personal.
Knowing when we were going to be appointed to come into the world.
Yeah, right. And that's why it's so important, not to stop life, not to disrupt that natural divine process of human life when it's born. It's just incredible, right? I mean, it's life, and you really only realize that when you get saved, I think. Let's see, we got another comment here from J. Hildebrand. Proverbs 29:9, if a wise man contendeth with a foolish man, whether he rage or laugh, there is no rest. So I'm not sure what that's, let's see, I should have read it probably before I posted it. If a wise man contendeth with a foolish man, whether he rage or laugh, there is no rest. So feel free to post what you mean by that, how that's, unless I'm missing it, Wendy. But
I think it's saying that because this person also said unbelievers are fools and love their folly.
I didn't see the previous comment.
It's just basically saying,
here we go. Thank you.
that the whole mindset of the unbeliever is just foolishness and folly, because even scripture and I believe it's Proverbs talks about and how does it go? The fool hath said in his heart, there is no God.
Amen. Yeah, excellent. Glad you pointed
that.
Calls
you a fool.
I only saw the last verse at first. I'm like, what? But it completely makes sense. And these are all such great verses, right?
Yep.
Again, going back to that. So thank you, brother or sister J. Hildebrand. Luke 1:44, Cage in the King James, for lo, as soon as the voice of thy salutation sounded in mine ears, the babe leaped in my womb for joy. So just the very presence of Jesus. Remember, it only took maybe a week, maybe 5 days, maybe a week and a half, or a week or so for Mary to travel by foot, likely to see her cousin Elizabeth and Jesus after conception. Jesus would have been maybe a week or two old in the belly at this point. Yet John the Baptist, who's about 6 months, leaps, just showing that life is present, even at 1 week.
Because both lives were still in the womb. And really quick, do you have access to the Greek for that, since that's the New Testament? Let's see what the Greek word is for babe. I believe it's going to tell us that it's fetus. because that's another argument that, oh, it's just a fetus. And I'm like, the person in my family, I had to tell them, fetus in the Greek means baby.
Yeah, I mean, fetus
I
is
believe
just a
it
Latin
does.
word. It's just a Latin word for
Or Latin.
little baby, right?
Right.
Like a little one. Here, I can look it up. Let's take a look here. I go to Blue Letter Bible for that. I don't often do this because, of course, we rely on the King James for what it says, but sometimes it doesn't hurt to look up the underlying word and compare scripture to scripture just to know what underlying word is being used. We don't reinterpret the Bible that way, but sometimes it can be a useful tool. So was that in Jeremiah 1:5 that you wanted to
Yes,
look
1:5.
at?
Yeah. Oh,
All
well,
right.
no, the New Testament about the babe leaving in the womb.
Okay, so that was Luke 1:44. Okay, let's go to Luke 1:44. Okay, where's the search? There we go. Luke 1. Can't type there. Okay, Luke 1:44, and then you do the Strongs, and it'll show you. Hopefully you can see this. Let me maximize this a little bit. Okay, Luke 1:44.
So you'd want to
The
look up
babe,
the G1025 and see what.
yeah, which is, and I don't know
Briefos.
Greek, but it's briefos, neuter noun, um, an unborn child, embryo, or a fetus.
Or
Because yes,
fetus.
all of these are synonymous. Because a fetus, an embryo, an unborn child, there's personhood. A
Right.
newborn child, an infant, a babe. Because it's so silly when people say, it's just a fetus in the womb. It's not alive. It's not a human. It's not a baby. Fetus is just Latin for a little baby. That's all that
Right.
means.
Right. And it's like,
Like, what are you
if
saying?
they try to say that, well, that's not what the word means now. Okay, well, you need to go back and, okay, because we know the English language changes the meaning of words. Okay, well, as far as the Bible, it's a fetus is always meant unborn child, embryo, an unborn child. Oh, you're muted, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So, well, those were some amazing verses. Thank you for that. And with that, I thank you, Wendy, for coming on. And I just like to go ahead and end the stream today with playing your song. If you want to, any final words before we head out and meet up again another time?
Well, just like with the procedure, just please be aware. I do use some pretty graphic imagery in the music video, so just mentally prepare for that. Those of you who have not heard the song or seen the video, just maybe pray, just mentally prepare yourself for it. But my hope is that that this video is going to reach people and help people choose life.
Amen, Wendy. Well, thank you for coming on. We do encourage everyone to choose life. Like the Bible says, lo, children are an heritage from the Lord. It's a blessing to have children, no matter what the world tells you, no matter how strong that propaganda is. And there's always adoption for those who just absolutely can't do it. So with that, God bless you guys. Thank you all for coming on. And I'm just going to leave you guys with with Wendy's song. And you can look up her song list. I've got her song list in the description of this video. I encourage you to go there and subscribe to Wendy's channel, because I'm going to also be going on her channel from time to time, and we want to get that going and get the algorithm stronger again. And so subscribe and share to this channel, to Wendy's channel. And thank you guys again. God bless, and enjoy this original song from Lorraine.
soul has been born. Will you let love grow? Do you even want to know? They say it is the mother's choice. Don't take her freedom away. What about the child growing inside? Where's that child's right to life? The silent scream you never hear, one that only heaven hears. A little girl or a little boy, did you even want to know? When will we say no more? What have we done? When will we take a stand? We have innocent blood stained on our hands, on the altars of sacrifice in the name of women's rights. It's where we have placed our children's lives. The silent scream you never hear, one that only heaven hears. Little girl, little boy, did you even want to know? When will we say no more? What have we done? When will we take a stand? We have innocent blood stained on our hands, on the altars of sacrifice in the name of women's rights. It's where we have placed our children's lives. Who will be the voice of the silent scream? Will we ever take a stand, or let life slip away?